Okay, so in this section we're going to refine this six-pack model. And the best thing to do really right now is just to go online and look for a six-pack reference image. I like this one because it's pretty simple. It gives you a good idea of what we're going for. And one thing we're gonna do is make this crease right here. Make sure this side wall comes up as opposed to just going perpendicular along the walls like it is right now. And also to put a handle inside, and then also just to add a little bit of detail to make it look like it's kind of folded on this side like it is in the image, just to give it some realism. And we're going to punch a hole using a bool object to get that handle. And we're going to use a couple tools, the knife tool, some extrude, and the bool object. Okay, so first thing we're going to do to start repairing this model and just kind of refining it is getting rid of these indents right here on the top. Now this is a little bit complicated, and I did it on purpose so I can show you a couple of tools that are really useful for repairing and refining models, because it's going to happen a lot. And the first thing that needs to happen in this is we need to delete these polygon faces that are right here. I'm just going to select those and delete. Hit delete. Select these and delete. Now, this is going on right here, which is not ideal. And if I went to point mode and selected this point and deleted them, and get this, which is also not ideal. So what we need to do first is define some geometry so we can delete this point and not mess up the rest of these cardboard walls right here. And to do that, I'm going to just right click, and you can use the knife tool. Now the knife tool allows you to draw lines and connect points together, and in turn makes new geometry. So, and you have different modes to go through. Line is really useful. I always like to use loop and plane, but right now we'll just use line. We'll keep single selected, because what that means is only one line is made each time. If you uncheck that, you can make sequential cuts with the knife tool, so to say. So keep that there, because we're just going to make one line anyway. Restricted selection means I can only make a knife cut based on the point selection that's currently there. I don't really like that all the time, so I like to uncheck this when I'm doing stuff. And we're just going to start with this point to this point. So I'm just going to start there, and you can see it highlights with a white, and then just click and drag to there. And it completed it because it made a blue line, just like the other polygon lines. So we have that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other wall right here, like that. And now we have this kind of isolated section right here. And I'm going to go to the live selection tool and just hit delete. And now that's really nice. It preserved the other cardboard walls. And we're going to do the same thing up here. Go back to the knife tool, right click, knife, and make it right here, make it right here, and then select that point, hit delete, and do it again for that point, hit delete. Perfect. That's all set up. So now what we can do is use the bridge tool to make an actual polygon face between this gap right here. We're going to bridge it. Now we can't use the knife tool for that. Let me show you why. So if I was to select this point, hit and go to the knife tool, and I wanted to draw a point right here, it wouldn't allow me to. But I would make a point like that, and it would get messy. Because the knife tool only works when there's already existing polygons made. So if I did that to here, it would work and also be a mess, but the line would get made. So we need to make a polygon face, and to do that we use the bridge tool. So if we right click again and we're in point mode, and you go to the bridge tool, and I can go to I can start right here, and I can just click and drag, and it'll snap to points, and then I'll go to that point, and then I can go to this point, and if I click like that, it makes a triangle, which is fine. You can make a quadrangle too, and I'll show you that in a second. But just to show you another polygon editing tool that's really useful, I'm going to do a triangle here, and I'm going to do a triangle there too. So now we have a triangle. We basically have a polygon, a quadrangle, with a diagonal line in the middle of it. And if I go to line mode, I can select that line, and if I hit delete, it deletes the whole face. That's not what I want. I want the line to go away, but to keep the polygon face intact. So the way to do that is to right click and have that line selected and go down to right here, the melt command. And what that does is it deletes lines, but it preserves polygon faces. It's very helpful for cleaning up polygon meshes. And so I'm going to go and do the same thing here. I'm going to use the bridge tool and make a polygon face right here to connect all these together. We'll go back to point mode, right click, bridge, start here, go there, and then just do that, and then start there and do that again. Now another polygon face has been made, so I can go to line mode, live selection tool, select that line, right click, melt. And then, because this is a pretty well-defined hole right here, I'm just going to use another really great useful tool called close polygon hole. And if I just hover over an edge point, either right here or just anywhere along the edge, it shows a highlight of what's going to happen if I click. And once I click, it closes that hole, and it gives you a green line, which is just a suggestion that's saying, hey, you should connect this together because it makes sense for the polygon mesh. And those aren't real polygons yet. That's not a real line until we use the knife tool to define that geometry. So I'll go back to point mode, right click, knife tool, and then just click and drag. And now it went from green to blue, so now it's a real polygon, and we're good. We've repaired that one indent. And just to make it complete, we're going to get rid of this middle line right here too. Now we could do, if we wanted to, we could just draw a line from that middle line up here and draw it all the way around back down to this one. Then we'd have 3 lines, but not really for any reason. There doesn't need to be that much definition for these cardboard walls. They're too thick as it is. And they're only that way because of this selection right here. So easiest way to do that is to use the knife tool and just connect these two right here, and then go to line mode and select this line, right click and melt it, make it go away. See, it's green. What's happening here is, even though the line's been melted, the points are still there. So the point is right there, and the point is right there too. So we need to also melt this point right here too. So I can be in point mode, I can right click, and I can also melt that point. And there's another one right here too. See, I can't select it because it thinks it's inside the polygon mesh, and I can't do that because when I'm in live selection mode, there's this checkbox right here, only select visible elements. Now it looks visible from here, but Cinema is thinking it's inside the mesh at some point and it can't be selected. So I need to uncheck this so I can select invisible elements and select that point. Now that's a little bit dangerous because I can actually, if I just make a selection like this, if I kind of just go around, it's possible to select points that I can't see back here, and if I was going to manipulate them and do whatever, then it would be a mess. So just be careful when you uncheck that to make sure that you have just selected what you need for that edit. So I'm going to right click and hit melt again, and it might, sometimes it doesn't delete with melt, but as long as there's a green line involved, it's not going to be that detrimental to just hit delete for points sometimes too. So I just hit delete and it went away. And there's also this part right here. So I'm going to go to line mode and select these two lines, and I'm just going to melt them as well. Now there's a bunch of green lines right here. As suggestions, I'm just going to go back to point mode, right click, use the knife tool, and define this geometry right here. And we should be good. That doesn't always need to be filled out. It's just giving you an idea. So I'll do the same thing over here. It appears to be these 2 points for some reason. We can just hit delete because they aren't, while they're on a blue line polygon, these green lines don't exist. They're just suggestions, so you can actually delete them and they won't delete the face. Okay. So I'll do the same thing here. Use the knife tool. Define this geometry. Go to line mode. Select this line and melt it. And then go back to point mode. Select that point, delete it, and select this point. Now when I deleted it, it made this hole because this line right here is blue. So I can actually just hit melt and it goes away. And I can use the knife tool like that. Okay, so for some reason this hasn't been defined. So just because I see this green line, I'm just going to define this geometry real quick so it knows what to do. There we go. And this one as well. So I'm going to put on pause real quick. I'm going to fix this other section right here, and we can get started with some more modeling. Okay, so that's been repaired. And now we have both sections of the 6-pack case ready to go. Now I'm not going to do the same thing on this part right here because we're actually going to need this middle section later on to use it as a fold. But we'll come to that in a second. Okay, so we have a pretty standard 6-pack case right here. First thing I want to do is, because of that picture, this elevated section right here, I'm just going to select these points right here and the ones on this side too. And just move it up. I like it. Might want to actually make this a little bit taller, I would think. Just a little bit taller. So I'm going to go to the rectangle selection tool, and this is actually I like to keep the rectangle selection tool unchecked with this, and then keep the live selection tool checked actually, so I can switch between the two and get different types of selections. So I'm going to uncheck this so I can select everything that I draw a square around, because I want to get these points right here that weren't visible from this perspective. So I have them all, and I can just use the move tool and expand them. Maybe a little bit too tall. Okay, great. That's looking really nice. Now the cool part at this point is it's starting to come together, and to really get everything right, we should totally bring in the beer bottle. And the easiest way to do that is to just open the project file, which is right here. Beer bottle plus label. Oh man, we should also put the bottle cap on it. Okay, cool. So right now, here's the beer bottle. So I'm just going to double click the lathe object and rename it to be beer bottle. And then call this beer label. And shift select both of them. Make sure I'm in object mode. And just Command C. Use window to go back to the other project file and paste them. Oh man. Nice. It's humongous. This brings up another point about cinema and scale. Without really getting into trying to measure everything with the measure tool, or, you know, really getting deep into making everything exactly the right measurement, what I like to do at this stage is to just drop a figure in, which is just a person. It's a person figure. It's what it's just called a figure. And you can set the height of this figure. And right now, for some reason, I mean, that's the thing. This is actually a 240-inch tall person, which is, 20 feet, I think. What I like to do is make this height a real person height, which is, I'll make this person 6 feet tall. So 12 times 6 is 72. You can do it like that if you want. But Cinema has a really nice trick too you can do, where if I'm going to do some math inside this field, I don't have to do it beforehand and tell it the answer. I can just do the math in the actual field. So I'm just going to do 12 star 6 like that, 12 times 6, and hit enter, and it automatically does the math for me and then puts the value in. So this is a 6-foot tall person, and you can see how that's a lot of beer. So this is a very good time to understand how to use null objects as parents to scale objects really quickly and easily without having to worry about remaking anything or anything like that. So the thing that's interesting is, obviously you don't want this to be a 10-foot tall beer bottle. It needs to fit inside this hand right here. So it needs to be like about this tall. That's my way of getting rough scale really quickly and pretty accurately. So here we have the beer bottle and we have the beer label. I want them to scale proportionally at the same time. And it's possible to, if I just selected both of them and went to the scale tool and started scaling, it's possible to do it that way. That doesn't always work. We're lucky because the axis center for the beer bottle and the axis center for the beer label are in the exact same spot at the origin. Sometimes they're not going to be that way, and there's going to be different axis centers for different things, and you want them all to scale proportionally. So the easiest way to do that is to go to the object menu, and right here in the top is the null object, which is really just a point in space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this beer bottle plus label, and I'm just going to make them children of this null object. And null objects are really useful too for grouping things together, because I can just put things inside this, and instead of having a list of objects as the scene gets bigger, I can put them in a null object and then fold it, and it just has that. And the nice part now too is, because they're children of this null object, I can move this null object around and everything moves with it. As opposed to if I just selected this and moved it, the bottle wouldn't move with it. So that's really useful, and now I can just scale this null object, and the children of the null object will scale with it. So I'm going to go here and just scale down. To be about a good size. That's a good start. What I'm going to do now is just move this figure and just put the hand right there, and just try and just rough in if the hand could hold this bottle. And that's basically how I set up scale on a really quick and easy way. Now that's pretty good, actually. That would look like this 6-foot tall figure looks like it could grab that bottle pretty well. Maybe just a little bit tiny, just a little bit smaller. Okay, great. So now we have a pretty good sense of real-world scale for this beer bottle. And the other important thing to bring in is we should bring in the bottle cap too. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this loft object, rename it bottle cap, and make sure I'm in object mode, and then just copy that bottle cap and paste it into this scene. And that's also going to be massive, like a UFO, which is pretty funny, I think. And the nice part is, because these are all children of this loft object, I can just scale the loft object, and all those splines will scale with it. So now that we know the bottle is the correct scale, we can just put it on. Now, how do I know this bottle cap is going to be exactly in the middle of this bottle? I could do a couple things by eye, but it's a little bit frustrating and it can take longer than really you want to take. So the easiest way to make sure that this bottle cap is going to sit exactly in the middle of this beer bottle is to make it a child of this null object, because we know the axis center of the null object is the exact same. You can see how this doesn't move when I select the beer bottle and the null object. The axis centers don't change. Now, what happens when you make something a child of an object like this? It inherits the coordinates of that object. So this isn't actually the real coordinates of this object. These are the coordinates of this object relative to the axis center of its parent. Now, if I take this bottle cap out of this null object, these change. These are now the coordinates and the distance away from origin, from 0. If I drag it back into the null object, it now becomes the distance away from its parent object, which is really nice because now I can just make those coordinates 0, and it will sit exactly at the axis center of its parent. And then from there, I can just drag this up to sit on the top of the bottle. And I can just scale the bottle cap, which is the loft object. I can scale that, and all the splines will scale with it until I think it's in a good spot. Looks a little bit, it looks more like a hat than a bottle cap. I think that's because it's not long enough. It's not vertical enough to really wrap around that lip like you would see on a bottle. So I'm just gonna select some of these cogwheels. I think it's these two right here. Just do a little bit of refining now that it's on the bottle. I like it. Now in this next section, I'm going to refine this further, put this bottle inside the 6-pack, and really start to get finished with this whole setup and to start to do materials and texturing. Okay, see you then.